What's going on, YouTube? Or Storm here, coming at you guys with another deck profile today. Today's going to be another episode of my Intro to series. I typically do this every new set. Amorphages will be first on the dockets, and then next, later this week, you'll have Lunalights, or Moonlights as their OCG name is, and Digibugs, or Digital Bugs. So Amorphages, as I do in these intro series, I do a little bit more explanation as to what the deck does, how it runs, etc. So Amorphages are basically like your they're the new Earth-based pendulum archetype from Shining Victories. They're obviously, this is kind of the rotating elements. We saw fire used in Ignites, we saw wind in Magispectors, we saw water in Dynamis, and now it's kind of gone full circle and we're seeing Earth. Now the thing about Amorphages is I don't think they're really as good as any of the previous pendulum archetypes we've received. They're very, very inconsistent, because the way the archetype works is that when you have an Amorphage monster out, they all have these corresponding pendulum effects that prevent certain things. It's like a floodgatey type archetype. The problem is with those floodgates comes a lot of inconsistencies. You have a lot of the Amorphage monsters have really just weird stat lines. Some of the best negators also, and the other thing is that every standby phase you have to tribute a monster in order to keep the floodgate active. And that's one of the biggest problems with the archetype in general, is that lack of consistency. I mean, the other problem is because it's a floodgatey type archetype. If you've ever played any of those types of decks, anti-meta decks in the past, going first is paramount. The problem is the setup often requires Persona, Infection, and and a scale and a monster, and that's like every card in your hand going first, and that's really, really problematic. But outside of that, I'll talk a little bit about then the tributing. A lot of the cards in the deck work around tributing. The field spell lets you draw cards up to twice per turn. Unfortunately, it's not an Amorphage card, so if you have Lux in the Pendulum Zone, you can't activate it. Infection is kind of like a black whirlwind. Every time a monster is tributed, you can add an Amorphage card from your deck to your hand. That's pretty nice. Also, as far as card choices in this deck, a few things I wanted to get out of the way. Nordiz is, I think, the secret rare in Shining Victories from the archetype. It's basically like a mistake when it's in the Pendulum Zone. The problem is this turns off your Infection. Infection is one of your key combo pieces. You have to get some kind of consistency going. So there's not a lot of other, I thought of a few other ideas. I guess you can, if you really want to, you can play stuff like Queen Dragon Jin to revive your Iridiums from Graveyard. With most of this out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and get to the deck profiles. First off, we have 3 copies of Amorphage Gaster. Gaster is basically like a Majesty's Fiend when it's in the Pendulum Zone, and it has... Amorphages are very similar to Infernoids. The little ones can only be special, where they have little ones have a monster have a similar, and the big ones have a similar monster effect, but the big ones function a little bit differently. So all the little Amorphage monsters have the effect, if they're flip face up or pendulum summoned, neither player can special summon monsters from the extra deck except Amorphage monsters. So it's sort of like a generic domain, basically. So, and the big ones, they require multiple tributes typically, at least in the deck by itself. So typically you're going to have, but they all have the effect. They have a big payoff because you don't have to pendulum summon them, which is really nice. Then, of course, you've got 3 copies of Lux. Lux is probably the best one because Lux is an Imperial Order while it's face up while it's in the Pendulum Zone, while you control a Morphage monster, and that's pretty goddamn good. Being able to stop your opponent from activating spells. There's a reason why Imperial Order is banned, and we don't have a lot of generic spell negation out there. Then 3 copies of Plest. Plest is basically like your Royal Decree. It's also level 4, which is really important because it's something you can easily get out. You can actually pendulum summon it. Then 3 copies of Olga. Olga is the reason I just opted for 3 Olga over these 2 guys is I feel like Olga kind of has the best. It has a decent effect preventing your opponent. It's like a Mask of Restrict when it's in the Pendulum Zone. It also has a decent attack line. Then 2 copies of Cavum. Cavum, while it's in the Pendulum Zone, is kind of like it prevents effects from being activated while cards effects are activating in a chain. So say you put a card in the Pendulum Zone. Say this is cards in the Pendulum Zone, and you pendulum summon. summon and try to activate effects or whatever, your opponent can't, chain something in response. Basically, if you activate, it's good in theory, but I never really found a lot of instances where it's useful. And then Hyper is, I think, the biggest attack Amorphage monster at 1750. Its effect is it prevents players from taking effect damage. It's meh. I feel like if you really wanted to run more, you could, but you don't. And of course, I am running the Draco engine here, but I'm running it kind of at the bare minimum, so I might have 2 Masters, 2 Vectors, 1 Rector, and 1 Luster. This one thing nice about having Rector now, if you don't know what Rector is, all these other monsters should be pretty familiar to you by now, but Rector is basically like a skill drain for Pendulum monsters on the field, and then it's sort of like a Catastor when it attacks a Pendulum monster, except it destroys itself in that card. If you have this in Vector, though, you basically lock. But the thing is, like, Pendulums aren't really seeing a lot of play right now, so that definitely is a factor. Then I have 3 Goliaths, or I think it's the TCG name, but we'll call it Iridium for now. The reason I played 3 of this is because it has one of the better Pendulum effects, which is basically, it does require 2 tributes. It's not the easiest monster to get on the field, but the cute thing about Persona and Infection is tribute summoning your bigger monsters does trigger them, which is pretty cool. So it's basically like a Macrocosmos while it's in the Pendulum Zone, and Macrocosmos and Dimensional Fissure hurt one for a reason, so that's pretty good. And then I'm playing one of the Ritual monster from the archetype. So if you don't know what this is, it's whenever it's Ritual summon, you skip your opponent's next main phase 1. So like it's just meh. But the main thing you care about is it's basically a skill drain for basically all Fusion, Exceed, and Synchro monsters. So the majority of the pretty much everything in the extra deck is going to be negated while this thing is out. So the main thing is if you do get your true Draco Awakening off, this is what you're going to be bringing out of the deck. Then then for the spells, 1 copy Draco Face Off. It is at 1, so you're not going to see it as often, so you kind of have to rely on other consistency, but having it is kind of nice when you do draw it. Then the one Forge of the True Dracos. Basically, how this works, if it's a Draco Slayer monster that's not a Pendulum monster, so Ignister or Master Pendulum in the future, and a Draco Overlord Pendulum monster are sitting on the field, you can basically just Fiber Jar the whole board and special summon a Psycho from your deck. That's really good. 2 Painful Decisions. I only have 4 targets, and it won't always be live because you kind of choose kind of a good number, at least the way I look at it. 3 copies of Infection. Like I said earlier, Infection has 2 effects. The main effect you care about is that all your Morphage monsters on the field gain 100 attack and defense for each Morphage card on the field. So it's kind of sort of similar to the Dynamist Plesios, the one that reduces attack except in reverse. And it also counts your opponent. So if you're playing like on a Morphage mirror match, it counts theirs as well. 3 copies of the field spells. So Field Spell has 3 effects, but there's one. The middle one is the one you really care about. It gives your Morphage monsters your attack and defense. And then the second effect is up twice per turn. Each time in a Morphage monsters, so say you tribute 2, it's the same thing. You control, you tribute it, you can immediately draw 1 card. Then you can banish it from your graveyard, then tribute Pendulum monsters from your hand or field, and basically it's like a Odd Eyes Advent for your Psycho. The basic thing is in an ideal situation, you want to have Infection, a Persona, Scales, and a monster, and a couple monsters out. But it's kind of like an ideal situation for sure. Then 2 Lysis. Lysis is the trap card from the archetype. What Lysis does, its main effect is it has one effect that's kind of like the reverse of Infection. It's all monsters on the field except for Morphage monsters, 100 attack and defense for each Morphage card on the field. And then it says if a card in your Pendulum Zone is destroyed except during the damage step, you can basically replace it with another Morphage monster. So say it's during your standby phase, you only have 1 monster out, you tribute 1, and then your second one dies. Well, you can just chain Lysis in response. 2 Quaking Mirror Force. Quaking has quickly become one of my favorite trap cards in the game. And I think in a deck like this, where you have a lot of really inconsistency, a lot of really small monsters, being able to put them in defense mode is really, really key. So now for the extra deck, 1 copy of Ignister. It's at 1, but nevertheless the card is amazing. Getting rid of annoying stuff is important. Then 2 Dynasters, especially because you have the second. I feel like there's a lot of games where you're going to make the second Dynaster if your Ignister gets stocked. 2 Magister Paladin. This card is really important for getting your initial combo pieces into your hand. Utopia and Utopia the Lightning. These cards are you basically out anything on the TCG side. One Abyss Dweller. Abyss Dweller's pretty much become the most relevant Exceed monster right now, and I feel like I'd honestly bump it to 2. One Arc for getting rid of annoying monsters you don't necessarily want to put back in your opponent's deck. One copy Castell for getting rid of annoying Floodgatey and problem threat stuff. One Emerald for recycling our engine, and one Karen Gorgon for keeping our skill state. One Giant Hand just to kind of give us a defensive option. One number 38 Hope Harbinger Gigantic, or whatever his name, number 38, basically to negate spells, and you can still make this play even though you don't have the extra Ignisters. And then of course the one Felgrand. So anyway guys, it comes about to the end of the video today. Stay tuned later this week. I'm going to be profiling Moonlights or Lunalights, and also on Friday I'll be doing digital bugs as well. So anyway guys, as always, thank you guys for watching. It's Warstorm signing out.